Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of American Scouser TV's Fantasy Premier League show. I am Gally, hosting tonight, coming to you from Western Massachusetts as usual. Little weather update. It's not too bad. It's a little rainy and crappy, but it doesn't feel like winter, so I can't really complain. Making some time here as we're waiting for Matouche, who is working his way through some technical difficulties as he tries to join the program. But we will get right at it because we have not been with you for a couple of weeks here on the Premier League Fantasy Show. We haven't been able to be together due to some holiday arrangements and some scheduling conflicts. But we get together here and we look at our table as of this afternoon. This is live, so this is going to include everything that has happened today with regards to the Fantasy Premier League world. We're looking here at the number one person in our division at 1,171 points, a good game week point of 48. Captain Salah didn't really work out there. Wouldn't have mattered seeing that they had Saka as the vice. Rolled over a transfer as well, which is interesting. But 3,700 overall in the world. Unused substitute, someone who's been leading our league throughout most of this season. Inside the top 6,000. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that our co host, who is having said technical difficulties and isn't here yet, which is probably my favorite part of the whole program, which means we don't have to credit him while he's on the program, is currently in seventh place overall, has the highest game week of anyone in the top 10. Really, really great job. He's been on an absolute heater. He was on the non-Holland wagon well before everyone else and definitely has benefited from that. And speak of the devil, and the devil might be with us.
The devil in sheep's clothing, I believe.
The devil on his cell phone or something, just
Doing what I
hanging with
can.
us. Yeah, well, I mean, there are always ways to get around things, and one of those things is go gorilla. So I appreciate you because I couldn't have done this alone. We were just giving you credit and praise, so we should probably just move on to the next segment. Um, but yeah, we were going through this, just our top 10 here, top 9 that we see on the screen. Credit to you, really great week, highest score of anybody in the league, in the upper tier as far as I scrolled through and looked at. Really great week. We'll look at your team later. Any other thoughts on this top 8 or 9 or
You know what? I just got a little bit lucky. I don't think there's much else to it. I I feel like because I had so much faith in Darwin and Huang He-chan that I was sort of rewarded for my patience. And not everyone's going to always end up as lucky as that. So I'll take what I can get right now. Obviously, I'm thrilled with how the week went, but now the real decisions start to come in, especially after this next weekend.
yeah, for sure. And we're going to talk a little bit about those decisions that everyone has to make. And, we can only put so many people on the screen. So, one of the things that we couldn't do here, we'll have to just apologize now to Trevor in 10th place and my wife, Kelly, in 11th. But there's no reason to credit them for anything at this point, obviously, because they're not actually on the screen or in the scoring positions. But when we think about where we're at here in this Premier League season, I think right now it's getting kind of coming down to that like crunch time where people are starting to think we're right at the midway point. We've reset the wild card so you can start using your chips again as you need them. People will be thinking about using their captains and their bench boosts and all the different extra chips they have, how to use their transfers. But if there's one thing I think that hangs over people right now, we talked about this weeks ago. It genuinely is the overall health of Erling Haaland because there are still some sides that are sitting him on the bench, which is maddening to me. There's some folks like me or my wife Kelly who jumped off of him weeks ago and reinvested, but are still leaving some extra money for when he's fit to bring him back in. Then there's people like you that haven't had him for a few weeks and have sworn that they're never going to have him in their side again. How close are you to coming back to reality that that's probably a stupid decision? And 1A, how much longer does Holland missing matches basically hold some Premier League EPL managers hostage? Because it seems like it's going to go on for ever because there's no timetable on this type of an injury.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult part is that there's no specific, like you said, there's no specific timeline. So there's no expectation of when we will know that he's back by. It pretty much comes down to how he's feeling. And with anyone who's ever had an injury, one of those nagging injuries that doesn't necessarily always go away, I myself, I obviously I've never played professional sports, but I played in high school and had some knee and ankle problems. And, sometimes if you get it just right, it does not go away. And you can take an extended amount of time. So I think the longer this goes on, the more difficult it's going to be for the fantasy managers, because especially with both the Asian Cup and AFCON coming into play next month, a lot of people going off of Mo, a lot of people going off of Sun. That frees up a good amount of money. But if you don't have the reassurance that Holland is going to be 100% fit, knowing where to reinvest that money is going to be the most difficult thing. And I know, we'll probably get into it a little bit, maybe in this episode, or maybe a future, maybe next week's episode or something. But if you can't rely on a $14 million striker to be fit and know that you're actually going to get something out of him, that is, for me, is a giant waste to invest that much money into it. And yes, I get the whole, trying to move back into him can be very difficult to move parts around if you're not set up for it. Which is why I'm a man of my word, Gal, you know that. And when I said that I'm not going to bring Holland back in, even if it means me losing a couple 100,000 spots, I don't want to bring him back in, because I honestly have had so much fun with the extra funds and always having money in the bank where I feel comfortable making a move. This last week's move wasn't the best in the world, I'll be honest, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think obviously there's a lot of money, a lot of just uneasiness and just not knowing what to do in the next couple of weeks when it comes to Holland.
Yeah, I think the Holland conundrum really comes down to the fact that City's not playing great, and on top of it, he wasn't even really firing when he was there. So it isn't even like you were getting this, ungodly return that if you were going to have this huge amount of fantasy FOMO because you didn't have Holland during this period. So it was like you held on to him waiting for that, and then you didn't get it. Then he gets hurt. Then you get this ambiguous kind of like, what is next? And it really made no sense to me of kind of why they even brought him to Saudi Arabia. He clearly wasn't ready to play. It just they seem like they're mishandling this. Maybe it's all for show, and this is just a little break to get him recharged and refreshed, and we'll see what happens. I personally am going to stay off of him for a little while. My plan was to go back to him when we got to the African Cup of Nations and the Asian Cup, which is the next topic that I did want to ask you about. So, when it comes to this, right, AFCON and the Asian Cup, it will have an impact on Fantasy Premier League. Heck, when we look at your team in a few minutes, we're going to see how it's going to have an impact on you, because you have 3 of your primary starters right now in your 5-man midfield that plays every week.
Right.
Will be gone for that period of time. When do you start transferring those players out? Are you planning to take hits? Are you planning to stash? What is your plan when it comes to your players that are leaving for an extended to or semi-extended period?
Yeah, I think in my case, and I know some other managers have a similar situation, I think the best route for me to take without feeling like I'm burning money or taking unnecessary hits is to go with a formation change because I can see myself moving off of Salah and Son to two other pieces and then just going with four midfielders and then moving off Huang the next week after that just so that I don't have to take an unnecessary hit. I think that's been one thing that I've been really good at this year is taking those hits because I think last year I was a little bit too slap happy with it. And if I would just hit my captains correctly this year, I probably would be a little bit higher than I am right now, which would be really nice. But excuse me. But yeah, I think for me, looking at where the pieces move to, I think what makes most sense is a formation change. I think that some players need to see that just because you've been stuck in a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, however you've been going this whole season, if there's a lot of player movement, a lot of player departures for a period of time, it's okay to shift the way that you've been playing in the first 3 months into different formations to make it fit. And I think that's going to be the best thing for me is to just get off of five midfielders and go down four.
And will you'll stash Wang for 1 week and then you'll turn around and sell him the following week? So you'll transfer out all three players that are playing at the AFCON or in their international tournaments.
Yeah, because the three guys there are probably going to go deep into the tournament, right? You've got Salah with Egypt to probably go deep. You got Huang in South Korea that's probably going to go deep, and then you've also got Sun, so also South Korea. So those two are strong in terms of where they're at in their continents and in the cup that they're playing. So I'm comfortable getting off of them for a long time because we might not see them for 3 or 4 game weeks. And that's a lot of game weeks to miss out on other points. And I think especially with Chelsea finding a little bit of form, there's some good midfield options there. And I mean, I hate to say, there's a little bit of value maybe in a United midfield here and there. So I think there is some value to be had, and to waste a few weeks on not moving into those spots could be harmful for the future.
So speaking of the future, we move into 2024. It's right around the corner. I every year I always think to myself, like, you go into a new year and it's kind of like resolution period. So if I were to ask you, other than not bringing back Holland, what is your 2024 EPL resolution that will help you move even further up those standings that you're already skyrocketing up?
Stick to my guns. I think that's been something that we both have preached for a while, is that usually your gut is pretty good when it comes to something like this. Don't burn a transfer for the sake, or don't make a transfer for the sake of making a transfer. I think last week I wanted to move off of Turner, and I moved into Dubravka thinking that Newcastle is a little bit stronger in the back than they are. And yeah, I mean, it didn't necessarily help. In both of our cases, if we just had Areola in, we'd be another 10 points up. But you play the fixtures as you see fit, and Arsenal at home against West Ham isn't a fixture that you play West Ham's keeper in, right? So I think that's part of the New Year's resolution, is just to not necessarily change what I've been doing, but to just continue to stick with what I feel comfortable with and what I know best. And that is that I just can get lucky at good parts in good moments. So what about yourself?
I think one is just staying consistent and not taking hits for no reason, and being like strategic with my moves and not being knee jerk. Like, I could be really frustrated. We'll talk about our teams and our weeks, and I could be really frustrated with the transfers I made this week because I had like 3 or 4 different shifts that I did with my side before settling on this. I'm happy with what I went with. I don't like the result. And basically, on a different day, it would have turned out to be 2 penalties and a max bonus points, and it would have been a great afternoon. And it was a good pickup with the guy I got. Like, the moves were right. And to your point, Arsenal at home against West Ham, they should score goals, and Odegaard and Saka should create during that, and they don't. and then they concede 2, and it's one of these crazy afternoons. So um I think my biggest thing with the new year, my like resolution wise, is it's fine to stay with the template while you're climbing, but if you really want to like move in this game, you have to be willing to make moves. And I think the next 5 to 6 weeks are really, really pivotal. And then I think after that, it's about playing the chips between February and April. Some people hold out till like May, and they play all their chips at the end. And I think it's crazy. I think sometimes you got to like find the right time and strike. I think a couple of years ago, I played my triple captain in like February, and I think it was last year, people thought I was crazy. And Rashford got like 22 points in a double game week, and I had the triple captain on him. He was like the third highest scorer all season long for a single match week. Like you said earlier, that's what you have to do. You got to get your captains right. You got to make your moves. Don't be afraid to sneak out and do something. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, I thought about captaining Solanke. Both weeks, he outscored the guy I captained. 1 week, he scored 17 points. I mean, I do those 2 moves, and I'm up with you. I'm ahead of you. I'm inside the top 25, 30,000, and I was outside of 300,000 before these couple game weeks. So it's those small margins in this game, and it's just not getting caught up in the hoopla. Like, follow the stats, but don't get crazy about them. You got to enjoy the game too. And I think that's the other thing. Like, my biggest resolution should be like, keep enjoying watching. I did this at first to learn all the players because I was trying to learn the game better. That's why I started this stupid ass game. Now, some people would probably argue I followed this game as much as I do the regular game. Like, it's asinine. I just wanted to learn the players and exactly what was happening and some of the stats behind it. And the next thing you knew, I'm looking at XG numbers and road splits and heat maps for players on Burnley. And that right there should be a drop that someone picks up and then follows up with, "Will be divorced soon."
Yeah, I think that's what can make the game a lot more exciting, though, is that you do get to dive into these different clubs. You do get to learn these patterns of play and kind of learn not just fantasy, but understand the game overall a little bit better, especially from like a tactical standpoint. The best way I find, especially, and this goes with other sports and fantasy sports, is the more opportunity you have to kind of open up your mind to the sport in different ways, the more you get to learn about it, the more exciting it gets. Because to the casual fan that is maybe just getting into the sport for the first time, sitting down and watching a couple games on the weekend, they're like, yeah, this is cool, this is fun, whatever, but I don't really know what I'm looking for. I don't know what to pay attention to. But if you have that person go into it, and they don't have to be serious about fantasy, they just have to build a team and just have different players that they can enjoy watching. It could be just, like I had a friend who I convinced to start playing, and he picked guys based off of the names. Like, I like this guy's name. That's the only reason I picked him, right? And then so he went in and was watching these games on the weekend just because he liked the names of some of these players. And now he's following the sport a lot more than he ever thought he would, and he's learning a lot. And when we talk about the sport, it's weird to go from where we started to now him talking about De Zerbi's tactics compared to what Ange's doing. It's just like,
How,
dude, where did the fuck did this
how,
come from?
how excited was he though that day when you played him and like head to head, and you realized he captained Fred? Because if
Right.
I picked the team purely off liking names, and I
Right.
found out there was a Brazilian named Fred, he would be on my team.
Yep, Fred. I think he also picked Saint Maximin the 1 year. Just guys like that, because it's, why not?
That's outstanding. I love it. I mean, listen, you can do a lot better than me picking just by players' names. I bet you could go ahead and just find like players' names that you could equate to an animal, and they would probably do better than the side that I had this week that I put on the field. But um, let's take a look here at some of the transfers in and out. I put it all in one slide this week. Um, you know, not much time in between the match weeks, so there hasn't been too much movement. Not a big surprise for me on the players coming in between Alvarez filling in for Holland, Alexander Arnold hitting stride. Solanke's probably the best Premier League asset for value right now in the entire game. And then, of course, Garnacho finally scores, and Bowen just does what he does, which is score a goal and or create an assist in every single match that West Ham plays. On those incoming players, anyone there you're trying to get into your side, you want your side, you are worried about not having in your side?
Yeah, Trent and Solanke already in the team. I think Bowen is one person that I'm targeting. Well, coming down from Sun and Salah. I think the other one, I'm probably looking at an Arsenal asset for the other mid right now. I mean, today aside, I feel like they're still a decent. They're still the second best team in the country, so there's still decent enough assets there. I think Garnacho is an interesting one because I mentioned earlier, I think some Man United mids would be interesting to target. It's hard to know if it's going to come from him specifically. I feel like there's a lot of spread out assets on that team that I'm not necessarily sure if he's the correct decision to go. He feels like a one in every three games contribution type of player, not a I can feel pretty confident he's going to contribute something this game kind of player. Alvarez, I obviously, I rode that train for a long time, and I can't get back on that station. It has left, and that's it. So yeah, I think Bowen for sure is someone I'm looking at, and I think there'd be an interesting pickup. I think West Ham, sneakily, they're playing really well this year, and I checked the table again after the game. I did not realize they were as high as they were, and they've just as last 3 weeks they've held clean sheets. So especially when it comes to the defender side of things, West Ham might be an interesting one to look at too.
Yeah, they do have a couple tricky fixtures, which is the reason I didn't bring in Bowen. Um, lined up coming up. I already have Alexander Arnold and Solanke. I had Garnacho earlier in the year. Didn't really work out for me at the time. The problem with Garnacho is I feel like with so much value in the pricing in the midfield, um, you unless you really have a reason to need all this extra money, like you're just investing huge in strikers, and why would you with the $14 million guy on the bench? There's just he's so far behind Cole Palmer that it just doesn't make any sense to like shift or make him your enabler because you don't need him to be, especially when Mo leaves for AFCON. So I think that makes Garnacho a little bit of a head scratcher here. That feels like it's reactionary. But that doesn't surprise me because that's what happens when good things happen to United. They overreact and people think that major things are happening when just really Villa had a bad 35 minutes. Speaking of bad minutes, Newcastle duo Anthony Gordon and Trippier 1 and 2 on the transfer out list. Is this based on form, fear of rotation, dried up offensive assets from a defender who can't defend any longer? Like, what is leading to this, or is it just price and timing when it comes to Trippier specifically?
There's a little bit of both. I think for what's being produced right now, he is too expensive. It's kind of back to the Trent dilemma from last year, is that you're not going to pay X amount for a defender that you honestly rely on for offensive returns, and when those aren't coming, and your defense is leaking in 2 to 3 goals a game, it's only going to hurt you when you're investing that much money. I think the Gordon one is a bit harsh on Gordon. I feel like he's still going to be one of the best assets on that team if you are on a Newcastle player for fantasy. So, like in my team especially, it's not a great feeling to see both of those guys in my team because then I'm kind of thinking, do I have to move off of them? But I can't move off of them given what's going to happen during January for AFCON and the Asian Cup. So, yeah, I think Trippier is just a mixture of expensive for what he's returning. There's a chance Newcastle comes into some form, but until then, it's tough to put that much money into a defender that isn't giving you anything.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. We'll talk a little bit about moves I'm thinking about making or going to make, and kind of where I'm looking at my team and what I'm trying to do with my funds. in a little bit when we look at our sides. I mean, the Holland one makes sense. People are finally jumping ship that we're holding him. Simicast, obviously, with the major injury. Matoma out for a few weeks, plus going off to international duty if he was fit. Makes total sense to me. And Gordon, I think, is just like the bloom coming off the rose in Newcastle. I think it happens. I think they're a little tired. They need to recharge. And I do think they will be a really good fantasy asset side as things turn and when the fixtures reshape for them. But it's not exactly the best time. And I think that's really rough because it's a time where you have to make transfers and they don't have players leaving that you need to transfer out. But a lot of us have 2 and 3 Newcastle assets in our side. And that's what really starts to bring you down, especially when you need players for those periods. So let's take a look at my side from last week. Dismal performance on my end, 35 points on a weekly score of safety of 43. I left 17 points on the bench, a net 16 had I started the right players. It's brutal because honestly, at one point I thought about rolling transfers and not making, or maybe only making one and actually playing Morris, which would have brought him in. Because my whole issue was Sterling and Palmer picked up late yellow cards in the match earlier in the week, or on the weekend, on Christmas Eve, which meant they were suspended for their match against Crystal Palace. So knowing I had 2 of my starting midfielders out, I felt I had to make at least one move, which made me make the double move. It wasn't a hit. I had 2 free transfers, so I didn't want to use them both. I made the move of taking out Sterling and bringing in Odegaard, and trying to remember who the other move I made was. I know I brought in Gross. It was Matoma for Gross. I was completely content with Gross. He starts every match for De Zerbi. He's the only player on Brighton that plays every Premier League minute. He's on most set pieces, and when Pedro's not on the pitch, he's on penalties. So it felt like a very easy pick, and at any moment he pops up and scores, and he's a low price. And I thought it was a nice differential. Of course, I also thought about, keeping Sterling and just bringing in Pedro for Morris and keeping my free transfer. And I had the money and I didn't. So it's just like one of these things. I was trying to outthink myself. I was making a 2-3 week move instead of a single week move. So that kind of frustrates me there. The other one that really frustrates me, I did think about dropping Trippier and bringing in a Stupion, but I have to admit he would have been on my bench, which probably would have made me even more mad because I'd have even more points on the bench. But I really believe that a Stupion is basically the defender to get right now. He's under 5 million. I think he's the best attacking defender in the Premier League when he's playing at form. And at this point, I think if I move off him and get Trippier, it gives me like 3.5 million in the bank. Plus, I'll bank another transfer and then I'll make my double move after Salah leaves for AFCON. And at that point, I'll decide whether I go back to Holland or just go to KDB and improve somewhere else and spread the funds around. The worst part is I feel good about this side all across the board. Outside of, my $3.9 million fodder on the bench that I don't want to waste a transfer on until I wild card. So, I haven't gone into the second half of a season not thinking about a wild card in about 4 or 5 years. And I think that a lot of that comes down to the fact that I've actually tried to strategically make transfers work for 3 weeks or more, or I don't make them. And I guess that's another one of my resolutions, like keeping to that discipline that I've had at least so far this season, because most years I'm literally thinking like, all right, we get to January, I'll get through the FA Cup and guys will come back from international break in February and I rip the wild card. Like, I'd really love to be able to hold the wild card like till late in the campaign if I can. Like, just use it when it's required, or use it when I can strategically set myself up for like big double game weeks or something along those lines, or a bench boost with weeks to come. It just doesn't feel like this team is something that I have a problem with, outside of the fact that I have to deal with Salah leaving for a few weeks and Trippier not really scoring. Everyone else has basically been pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree with the sentiment that you have there, and I think Estupinian, he's getting to that point where, like last year, he was a guy that you couldn't not have on your team, especially if he's going to be plugged in more often. The goal that he had today was just absolutely incredible. Obviously, you're not going to get that worldly from him every week, but you're going to get one of the best wingbacks going forward, and always being part of that play up there. So I think that's a great get for you, especially because you have more flexibility when it comes to the AFCON and the Asian Cup. You're not so reliant on guys that are leaving, or as many guys that are leaving as other players. So I think you're in a good spot. And I like the team overall. Like you said, it just one different move here and there, and it shoots you up. It just kind of goes to show how fickle the game can be.
Yeah, I definitely think I think this week I probably make that move. I think I do Trippier to Estupiñán just to get him into the lineup. I kind of was hoping I wouldn't see Estupiñán play, because then I would be a lot more confident about the start. Um, and Brighton still does have the Europa League, which I don't love, because I think they have to take that seriously once it does kick back in, but that's not for a good 4 or 5 weeks. So I feel like I can ride that through. They do have the best fixtures overall in the fixture ticker. They are top of the fixture ticker, both attacking and defensive. So I guess if you have their best defender, who also might be their best attacker, it's not the worst fantasy dice to roll. So I'm probably going to do that, bank the money, wait another week, obviously, and then take the extra transfer, potentially just drop down to KDB, and then take a lot of that money and either invest up with Morris or bring another midfielder up. I do like your shout about the United midfielders, but I've been, just snake bit by having Bruno Fernandes for too many weeks this season, when he was, rated one of the best players to have, and it never worked. So, speaking of a team that's working, talk me through your side, what you did this week, what you wish you had done, and, well, how lucky you were that you still have Hechan in your starting lineup.
What I wish I would have done was nothing at all. But then if I had Turner, I probably would have had Turner over Areola still anyway, so it would have just been one extra point, rather than what I had there. So I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference. I think, kind of going off of what you were saying with your Solanke captain issues, was that I really wanted to put the armband on Trent, because I felt really good about the fixture, and I felt like, if anything, Liverpool was either going to have a clean sheet or Trent was going to be involved in some way going forward, and that alone would have been a nice extra little bit of boost there. So I think that's the thing that I'm kicking myself most about. And obviously, I think what I mentioned earlier is I didn't want to lose a transfer, because I had 2 free transfers. So I figured, if I don't want to make any moves, and we kind of want the set and forget keeper, if I just moved into a keeper that I felt more comfortable with in the long term, then moving from Turner to Dubravka made sense. And now with Dubravka and Areola, I feel like there's better flexibility than where there was with Turner and Areola. So at least there's that positive out of everything. But yeah, I mean, there's exactly like you said. I'm just lucky that I held on to Hwang Hee-chan and Darwin as long as I have been, just because I felt like at some point, like the gambler's fallacy. At some point, they had to return something. And if he doesn't go down with a back injury, he might have had another one. Who knows? So I think he's going to be the easiest one to move off in 2 weeks, just because he might not play this weekend, especially if he wants to go off and play internationally. I don't know if it's something that the Wolves manager would necessarily want to throw him in if he's not 100%, just for the sake of putting him in. So I think, yeah, the big thing is, I love the KDB shout from you. And that's a direction that I was thinking, is if I'm not going to go back to Holland, KDB would be a nice alternative, because I still have the the piece of the city pie, without going to the Viking himself, like I promised I wouldn't. So, yeah, I think this week what I might end up doing is I might move down from Sun, to someone like Bowen or Saka, just to then have my next two free transfers after the weekend, after Salah leaves, and see then what I feel more comfortable with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would be a little worried of going off Sun with a week to go with him just because he's so highly owned and could go off at any point, and you have him. The money's still going to be in your bank. You just use the transfers however you need. I almost feel like if you're going to go off one of them, you go off Hechan now, find your fodder or whoever you want to fill, and then know what you kind of want to do in the next week or the next 2 weeks with the Sun Salah money, and just spread that around your side. Because if you know you're going to move the guys, it doesn't matter what order you do it, especially if you don't know that if he's going to play this week. So he's either stashed on your bench for a zero, or you make him a player that turns into a bench player so you can start major guys and then you reinvest that money next week. But you have a lot of different options. You have a nice balance here on your side. I think one of the things that's really big that I don't think enough people are talking about or recognizing is how important the captaincy selections are going to be over the next like 3 to 4 weeks. Because ultimately it was Holland all the time, except for the few times that someone would say Salah or maybe a Son against Luton or someone else would creep into the conversation. Recently, you've had a couple weeks where people, somewhat favored other players, but mostly it was just Mo Salah, Mo Salah, Mo Salah, because Holland's out. We're going to go into a period with no Salah, no Son, and potentially Holland on the shelf. The captaincy selections and percentages between Solanke, Watkins, you made a good shout earlier, folks captaining guys like Trent, just looking for the absolutely massive haul. How tempted are you with no Mo Salah to captain Darwin for the month of January and see if you can't get yourself into like the top 20,000? I'm serious when I say this. You wrote him long enough.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's exactly what I've been thinking in my head is who am I going to be most comfortable captaining, and for me, it's between one of the three forwards, and going between Dom and Ali and Darwin, it's tough because I think when Mo leaves, especially us being Liverpool fans, the production has to come from somewhere, and Nunez has been. He's been in around the finishing products of a lot of goals this year, and if there's going to be anyone to sort of take on that responsibility and that has to take on the responsibility, it's going to have to be Nunez. I think this month, and this could be obviously a long discussion by itself. I think this month is going to be pretty crucial for Nunez as a player at Liverpool. I think he needs to really showcase what he's capable of, be able to finish when he needs to, and be able to sort of to be the player that we feel like he can be, especially with Mo gone, because this could be the turning point of his trajectory at Liverpool, whether it's good or bad. It's going to come down to these 3-4 fixtures next month. So yeah, obviously I'm really tempted to captain him, especially since I've had him for so long, and just because if it's going to come from somewhere, it's got to come from Darwin, because with Aston Villa, we've seen Diaby and McGinn, and Bailey be the guys. We've seen a Bournemouth. We've had Bournemouth. I mean, it's spread around a little bit, but Solanke's been a big part of that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go. And you make a great point. It's going to be the most exciting month, I think, for fantasy because of how non-template captaincy wise it's going to be. We're going to see a lot of mixed percentages. It's not going to be effective ownership isn't going to be as crazy as it has been recently with Mo and Holland in the last 18 months.
With the possibility of no Mo in the side for 3-4 weeks, And I don't really ever think about this because, well, Mo plays every minute of every game. Do you think Darwin's on penalties?
No, I
He
don't think
took
so.
he took he took two of them in the preseason with other players on the field. The only one I could think of, I think it would be McAllister if he was on the pitch, but he's hurt.
See, I think it's Soboslai.
I mean, well, I'm not gonna put any more opinion in because I'd argue there's no reason he should be on the pitch at this moment unless it's the cup
Yeah,
game.
no, I mean that's a different argument for sure. But if he's on the pitch, I think he's the taker. Obviously,
I've never seen him take one. Never seen him take one for the club yet. So it'd be interesting to find that out, though, right? Like, that's
yeah.
an interesting point. I'll tell you this right now: if Darwin Nunez is fouled, Soboslai better have a sword and an army if he thinks he's going to take the ball off him. Because I think he would go straight up, pull the hair down, and go samurai on him if he tried to take the ball off him in that spot. Like, I think, and that's where I kind of like him. Now, he would do that and then he'd kick the thing 10 rows into the crowd. Like that, that's what
But
he
it's
would
the
do. And that's the
confidence that we
problem.
love.
But it is the confidence. And you know what? The crowd would support him before. The crowd would support him when he was fighting the guy off the ball. And the crowd would support him actually when he took it and missed. And the crowd would support him the next 10 minutes when he ran around like crazy man because they love him, because they love how hard he works. And they love that when he's on the field, good things happen and more goals are scored when he's on the pitch than not. And 9 times out of 10, he's somewhere close to the play. Whether it's the play that leads to it or the play that breaks it up or the, you know, chaotic moment that attributes. And I think from a fantasy standpoint, I think he has the biggest upside. I do think there are other players in Liverpool's side that are just as equally valuable to be looking at. I think Virgil is valuable coming down the stretch in January into February. There's a good fixture swing defensively where having Liverpool assets there will help. I think that there are some teams out there you want to stay away from. I think my biggest thing is that I look at like players I'm trying to keep an eye on. I'm trying to keep an eye on, obviously anyone that's moving teams. That's always important. I think the teams that are out of Europe completely are easier to focus on now than what we're going to have. Because I think come February and March, when the European competitions restart, I think it gets really, really dicey because there are a lot of assets we like between Villa, Liverpool, Brighton, West Ham, City, and Arsenal. Like a lot. And I just don't think these teams are going to be able to keep playing 2 matches at this level a week, especially when the ones in Europe become a lot more important. To be totally fair, none of the Premier League sides really had that tough of a group stage competition outside of Newcastle in all of Europe. And almost all of them progressed. I mean, other than the one that finished rock bottom, of course. But, well, we don't need to talk about them. This is a fantasy show. So I think that, too, is going to be really, really interesting the second half of the season. Like, how do those teams manage and how do we as fantasy managers manage in kind of balancing all of that?
So what I want to ask is give me one team that many managers have several assets of that you say avoid at all costs this next month. Which team would you avoid most?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I
have one.
think everyone is already avoiding Brentford as a whole just because they are a train wreck in themselves. Avoid for the next month. I mean, I have been avoiding City for a long period of time just because I have no confidence in them. They can't keep clean sheets. They leak goals in every single match they play. And now, even when they score them in such wrangled bunches. I don't know. Who are you thinking? Maybe after you give me one, I'll be able to kind of come up with my idea. That's a good question.
The one that I've been struggling with, and it's because I have a couple assets, is I think Spurs are going to struggle a lot next month. I think with the amount of injuries they have, and there are several players of theirs leaving for AFCON and the Asian Cup, I'm really worried about that team overall. And so I think while I have Pedro Porro, he might stay during that month still, just because I think he's good enough, and price wise it's not bad enough. I do think Spurs are going to hit a rough patch with who they'll be missing and just overall. So I think out of many of the top teams that many managers have assets from, I think that's who I would go with.
I do like that shout because they do have a lot of players. You forget. I think Basuma leaves, Pape Sarr leaves. Obviously, their talisman and son leaves. I think Solomon might leave. They do lose quite a bit. What I will say is I think they do have a couple assets though as players are leaving. Like Brendan Johnson becomes a differential at 5.8 or whatever it is as an attacking midfielder that can score a goal. Still think attack wise, I think Richarlison's in the best form he's had since, banging in the goals to keep Everton up 2 years ago. So I do think there are some players there, and they're going to get Madison back in the next couple weeks, which will help a lot. But defensively, I don't think you can be looking at them or the keeper for any clean sheets or any points outside of attacking returns.
Yeah.
Where I agree with you, where I would disagree a little bit is I don't think there's any question. You keep Pedro Porro. Pedro Porro is he is Trent of 3 years ago at his price point when he was like a 5-something midfielder or 5-something defender and scoring like a midfielder. He is João Cancelo 2 years ago as the best fullback in the league. Like right now for me, Pedro Porro is he's the first name on the team sheet on every good FPL team there is, because the guy literally gets an assist every single. I mean, today is a prime example. They conceded 4,
and he still got 2 bonus points.
He still got you 5.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Like he's that good, and he brings that much to the game, and that's because he's always in attacking spots. And honestly, he looks the most ready of any defender in the Premier League to score a goal every single week. He pops up in crazy positions, and I swear at the end of every match, the manager tells him he wasn't attacking enough because the next match it looks like he attacks more. Which is fine with me as long as he's in my side. And I'll probably keep him in there. In some matches, I may rotate him out because I think you're right. They are going to struggle a bit. I think they're in trouble. I also think there are a lot of those other medium-sized teams. Like, I just still feel like it's a waste. I know everyone's getting all like hot and bothered around Elise and Eze again because they're these medium price differentials on a team that should score some goals now that they're back playing. They still don't ever look like they're going to score a goal anytime I watch them play. There's nothing about Fulham that makes me excited. There's nothing about Brentford, and I know Ivan Toney's going to be back soon. Will he be playing for this team? Will he be, the backup striker at Arsenal? Will he be a backup at Chelsea? Who the hell knows? Do I want a player who hasn't played in 11 months coming cold off the bench? Probably not, right? Like, I just feel like there's a lot of teams right now, and I think this is the problem. We all invest in the same teams, and then when a result like today happens and none of the guys you expect to score, it kind of breaks the game because nobody makes an advantage. There's nobody moving up, so then the people at the top have a bad week, but they still either rise or just kind of hang where they are, which is almost even worse. Like when the top 10,000 have a bad week, everyone else needs to do well.
Yeah.
If Mavropanos are scoring, none of us are doing well, except for that Greek guy who had him on his team. I digest. But we are going to get out of here on these note. As always, please, if you haven't already, head on over to the YouTube page. give the channel a subscription, leave a comment, let us know your thoughts on the show. If you think we can do better, let us know how. If you want to get involved, send in your team, send in your questions. We'd love to read them on air while we're going through the program. And as always, we hope that all of your transfers hit. Your moves make sense. You don't take too many hits. And on behalf of everyone at American Scouser TV, we hope you all have a wonderful and mostly safe New Year's. We will be back next Thursday night to talk exactly how poorly we did rolling over into the new year and hopefully talk more about a green arrow for the guy who's searching. Not the host, the other guy. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week and Happy New Year.